In the summer of 2018, Daniel Cooper bought 80 acres of Kansas farmland for $300. $300. You're probably thinking, what's the catch? Well, the catch was that the property was cursed. At least, that's what everyone said. The locals called it Blackwood Farm, and they wouldn't go near it. The previous owner, an 87-year-old woman, practically begged Daniel to take it off her hands, then warned him, "Don't go in the barn after dark. Don't dig near the old well. And if you hear children laughing when there are no children there, you run." Daniel didn't believe in curses. He believed in cheap land and second chances. But when his stubborn gray mare Duchess refused to leave one spot on the property, pawing at the ground, whinnying in distress, acting like something was buried there, Daniel made a decision that would change everything. He started digging. And what he found beneath that Kansas prairie had been waiting exactly 100 years to be discovered. This is the true story of Blackwood Farm, the family that vanished in 1923, and the secret that was buried with them. Every word of what you're about to hear actually happened. And I promise you, by the end, you'll understand why some places are sold for $300. Daniel Cooper was 34 years old and completely broke. He'd spent a decade saving money to buy his own ranch, $45,000 saved through pure sacrifice and determination. Then his ex-wife's lawyer found a legal loophole, and in one courthouse appearance, Daniel lost $38,000. What he had left, $7,000, wouldn't buy him anything. Not in 2018. Not in Kansas, where land prices had exploded. But then he found a listing on an obscure rural property website, Blackwood Farm. 80 acres. $300. Cash only. As is. No questions asked. The woman who answered his call was terrified just talking about the property. Margaret Blackwood, age 87, met him at a nursing home in Wichita and thrust a manila envelope at him. Her hands shook violently. "Take it," she whispered. "Take it and never contact me about it again. That land has been a curse on my family since 1923. My grandfather's family disappeared there. Vanished. Never found. 23 people have tried to live on that property in the last 95 years. Not one lasted more than 3 months. Most left within weeks. Some left in body bags." She grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "Don't go in the barn after dark. Don't dig near the old well. If you hear children laughing, run. Promise me." Daniel promised, took the deed, and walked out thinking he'd just made either the best or worst decision of his life. $300 for 80 acres. It was either an incredible bargain or a death sentence. He drove out to see the property the next morning. What he found looked like something from a horror movie. A Victorian farmhouse, paint peeling, windows broken, porch sagging. A massive barn leaning at a dangerous angle. Outbuildings collapsed and reclaimed by prairie grass. And everywhere, this oppressive silence. No birds. No insects. Just wind and the creak of old wood. As if the land itself was holding its breath. Daniel knew he couldn't work 80 acres alone. He needed help. That's when Tom Harrison, a retired rancher in Millfield, offered him a horse. "Her name's Duchess. She's 12 years old, stubborn as hell, but she's smart. Too smart, maybe. I'll give her to you for free if you promise to take care of her." There was something odd in the way Tom said it, but Daniel wasn't going to turn down a free horse. When Duchess arrived, she was beautiful, a gray mare with intelligent dark eyes and a regal bearing that explained her name. She explored the entire property that first day, checking everything out like a new homeowner inspecting their purchase. And then she approached the old barn. She stretched her neck toward the open doors, nostrils flaring, clearly trying to smell what was inside. Suddenly, she jumped backward so violently she nearly fell. Her ears went flat. Her eyes rolled white. She made a sound Daniel had never heard from a horse, a high-pitched scream of pure terror. Then she ran to the far corner of the pasture and refused to move. Daniel walked to the barn and peered inside. Empty. Just dusty hay bales and old equipment. Nothing that should frighten a horse. But for the rest of that day, Duchess wouldn't take her eyes off that barn. She stood in her corner, body tense, head up, ears rotating like radar dishes, watching those doors as if expecting something to emerge. That night, when Daniel left the property to sleep in town, Duchess walked over to his truck and stood beside it. The message was clear: don't leave me here alone. Something's wrong with this place. You'll be fine, Daniel told her, though he wasn't sure he believed it. I'll be back in the morning. But as he drove away, watching her in his rearview mirror, standing alone in that pasture, still staring at the barn, Daniel felt a knot of guilt in his stomach. And something else. Something he didn't want to name. Fear. Over the next few weeks, Daniel established a routine. Work on the property during the day, sleep in town at night. And every single day, Duchess exhibited the same strange behavior. She wouldn't go near the barn. That was consistent. But there was something else, a spot in the northeast section of the property where she would stand for hours. Just standing. Staring at the ground. Pawing at it occasionally. Like she was trying to tell him something. What is it, girl? Daniel would ask, checking the area for snakes or holes or anything dangerous. But there was nothing. Just prairie grass and dirt. Then one day, Tom visited and saw Duchess's behavior. His face went pale. Where exactly is she standing? Daniel showed him. Tom pulled out his phone and checked a historical map of the property. Jesus. That's where the old well used to be. The one from the 1800s. The sheriff sealed it in 1923, right after the Blackwood family disappeared. Why would they seal a well? Daniel asked. Tom's expression was grim. Because of what Joseph Blackwood found at the bottom. The man had been digging that well deeper and deeper in the months before his family vanished. Became obsessed with it. And then one day, September 14, 1923, the entire family disappeared. Joseph, his wife Emma, and their 3 children. Gone. Like they'd never existed. The sheriff investigated and found something. Something that made him seal that well permanently and mark it as forbidden. The official report just says, for public safety. But my grandfather, who was a boy at the time, told me the truth. The sheriff found evidence that Joseph had broken through into something. A cave system. And whatever was in that cave system took the family. Daniel stared at the spot where Duchess stood. You're saying there's a sealed well right there? Underground. And my horse somehow knows it. Horses sense things we don't, Tom said. They can smell water underground. They can feel vibrations in the earth. They know when something's wrong with land. And Duchess is telling you something's wrong right there. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Duchess standing over that spot. About a family that had vanished a century ago. About a well that had been sealed for public safety. About Margaret Blackwood's trembling hands and her warning, don't dig near the old well. But how could he not dig? If there was something there, something that explained the property's history, didn't he need to know? Didn't he deserve to understand what he'd bought for $300? The next morning, Daniel made a decision. He would excavate the area where Duchess kept standing. He'd find the sealed well. And he'd finally understand what had happened to the Blackwood family. Daniel brought in a small excavator, nothing fancy, just enough to move dirt. Duchess watched from a distance, her body tense, as he began digging in the spot she'd been fixated on. 3 feet down, his excavator hit something solid. Stone. Daniel jumped into the shallow hole and brushed away dirt with his hands. What he uncovered made his blood run cold. A massive stone slab, circular, about 6 feet across. And carved into the surface were words, weathered but still readable. Sealed by order of the law. Do not open. 1923. And below that, in smaller letters, What sleeps below must not wake. Daniel sat back on his heels, staring at those words. Every instinct screamed at him to stop, to bury the slab again and forget he'd ever found it. Margaret's warnings echoed in his mind. Don't dig near the old well. But he'd already dug. The well was exposed. And Daniel knew himself well enough to know he couldn't leave this mystery unsolved. He needed to see what was beneath that stone cap. He needed to understand what had terrified generations of people. He called Tom. I found it. The well. It's sealed, just like you said. But Tom, I need to open it. I need to see what's down there. There was a long silence on the phone. Finally, Tom said, if you're going to do this, you're not doing it alone. I'm calling my grandson Marcus. He's a geology professor. If there's a cave system down there, we need to explore it safely. Give me 2 days to get things organized. Those 2 days were the longest of Daniel's life. He couldn't stay away from the sealed well. He'd stand there at sunrise and sunset, staring at that stone cap, reading those warnings over and over. And Duchess would stand nearby, watching him, her expression almost knowing. As if she were thinking, finally, you're finally listening. On the morning of the 3rd day, Tom arrived with his grandson Marcus, a geologist named Sarah Chen, and all the equipment needed for a safe cave exploration. Ropes, harnesses, helmets with headlamps, air quality monitors, everything. We do this right, Marcus said. We open the well, I assess safety, and if it's safe, we do a preliminary descent. Just to see what's there. Agreed. Agreed, Daniel said. They attached chains to the stone cap and connected them to a winch on Tom's truck. As the cap began to lift, something changed. The temperature dropped 15 degrees in seconds. Everyone's breath became visible. And from below, as the cap shifted, came a sound, a deep vibration that you felt in your chest more than heard. Duchess, watching from her pasture, began screaming again. That same high-pitched sound of terror. But it was too late. The cap was off. The well was open. They gathered around the opening, shining flashlights down. The well shaft dropped 30 feet, normal depth. But at the bottom, instead of water, there was an opening. A natural cavity in the limestone, leading deeper into the earth. And from that opening came air. Cold, ancient air that smelled of minerals and stone and something else. Something wrong. There is a cave system, Marcus whispered. A big one. Daniel was the first down. The descent through the well shaft was straightforward. But when his feet touched the floor of the cavity below, his perception shifted. The cave was enormous. His headlamp couldn't find the walls. And throughout the space were carved stone pillars covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. Arrangements of rocks in strange patterns. And in the center, a pile of bones. Human bones. Tom descended next, then Marcus. All three stood at the bottom, their headlamps revealing more and more of the impossible cave. This can't be natural, Marcus said. Someone shaped this place. Intentionally. They moved closer to the bones. They weren't just piled randomly, they were arranged in a specific pattern. And they weren't all the same age. Some were ancient, weathered to gray. Others looked about a century old. And some looked newer. How many people? Daniel asked, his voice shaking. Marcus examined them with a professional's eye. At least 20 individuals, spanning possibly 1,000 years. This wasn't just where the Blackwood family died. This was a site of ritual sacrifice used for centuries. And that's when they heard it. Footsteps. Coming from deeper in the cave. Multiple footsteps. And voices, children's voices, singing in a language they didn't recognize. Up! Marcus shouted. Everyone up now! They scrambled for the ropes, climbing faster than they'd ever climbed, hearts hammering. And just before Daniel pulled himself over the edge, he made the mistake of looking down. There were figures in the cave. Dozens of them. shaped like children but moving wrong, their joints bending impossibly, all reaching upward, as if trying to grab the climbers. Daniel hauled himself up and collapsed on the grass. Tom came next, then Marcus. They replaced the stone cap immediately, sealing the well once more. As it slid into place, they heard screaming from below, angry, frustrated screaming that cut off the moment the seal was complete. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally Sarah, who'd stayed on the surface, whispered, "What the hell was down there?" No one had an answer. But Daniel knew one thing with certainty. He just uncovered the secret that had been buried for 100 years. And it was more terrible than anything he could have imagined. For the next 2 weeks, Daniel became obsessed with understanding what he'd found. He spent every day at the Millfield Library, researching the history of Blackwood Farm and the family that had vanished. The sheriff's report from 1923 was vague but disturbing. Joseph Blackwood discovered something beneath his property. What he found, I cannot say. But I am certain that whatever drove that family from their home came from below, not above. I have sealed the well and recommend it never be reopened. Some things are better left buried. Daniel found one more crucial piece of evidence. A letter written by the traveling minister who'd visited the farm after the disappearance. I felt an oppressive presence on that land. Whatever resides there is old. Older than recorded history. The sheriff sealed something. A well. I pray his seal holds. I must warn him, some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. The pattern was clear. The Osage Nation, who'd lived in the area for centuries, had legends about this land. A place where the earth is thin, where the boundary between the world of the living and the dead was permeable. They'd found a natural cave system and sealed it, marking the area as forbidden. Joseph Blackwood had built his well directly over that sealed cave. He'd broken through. He'd accessed whatever was below. And it had taken his family as payment. Daniel sat in the library, the weight of this knowledge crushing him. 20 families over 1,000 years had been taken by whatever dwelt in that cave. The Osage had tried to seal it. The sheriff in 1923 had tried to seal it. And now Daniel had unsealed it again. But I sealed it back, Daniel said to Tom when he shared his findings. The cap is back on. We're safe now, right? Tom's expression was troubled. Safe from what, exactly? From being pulled into the cave? Maybe. But Daniel, you've acknowledged its existence now. You've seen it. You know it's there. In my experience with this land, that changes things. Ignorance was a kind of protection. Knowledge is a burden. And now you carry that burden. Daniel had to make a choice. He could sell the property, admit defeat, cut his losses, and walk away. Or he could stay, armed with knowledge, and find a way to coexist with the terrible thing beneath his land. He chose to stay. Because despite everything, despite the horror in the cave, despite the dark history, despite the warnings, Blackwood Farm was his. His land. His chance. His $300 fresh start that he'd fought too hard to abandon. But he took precautions. Serious precautions. First, he built a fence around the sealed well, a serious structure of railroad ties and barbed wire. Then he covered the stone cap with 3 feet of reinforced concrete. If anyone wanted to open that well again, they'd need industrial equipment. Second, he documented everything. He wrote a detailed account of what he'd found and gave copies to Tom, Marcus, the County Historical Society, and a safety deposit box. If something happened to him, if someone else bought the property, they'd have a warning. A real warning, with evidence. Third, he established boundaries on the property itself. He used old folk remedies, salt across thresholds, iron horseshoes above doors, protective symbols. Marcus scoffed at it, calling it superstition. But Tom supported it. When you're dealing with things that shouldn't exist, old superstitions start looking like practical safety measures. And it worked. The haunting didn't stop completely. There were still strange sounds, still moments when the air felt heavy, but it became manageable. It was like living near train tracks. You learn to function despite the noise, to accept it as part of the environment. Daniel's theory was that sealing the well had weakened whatever was below but hadn't eliminated it. The boundary between worlds was still thin at Blackwood Farm. That couldn't be changed. But by keeping the well sealed and maintaining respectful boundaries, he'd reached an uneasy truce. Most importantly, he listened to Duchess. The mare had tried to warn him from day one. She'd known something was wrong with the barn, wrong with the well, wrong with the land. Now, whenever she got nervous about a particular area, Daniel investigated and usually found some legitimate concern. A weak fence, a hidden danger, something that needed attention. Whether Duchess was sensing normal dangers or supernatural ones, Daniel couldn't say. But he trusted her instincts completely. Life on Blackwood Farm settled into a new normal. Daniel repaired the house, built a new barn in a different location far from the well, cleared fields, and established fences. He was actually building something. Creating a life. Making the cursed property into a functioning ranch. And slowly, very slowly, Blackwood Farm began to feel less like a haunted property and more like simply an unusual one. A place with a dark history and ongoing strangeness, but a place where life could still be lived. Daniel had been living on Blackwood Farm for 5 years when he realized the significance of the approaching date. September 14, 2023. Exactly 100 years since the Blackwood family had disappeared. The thought troubled him more than he wanted to admit. In his research, he'd found references to cyclical patterns, things getting worse at certain times. What if 100 years was significant? You're being paranoid, Marcus told him. It's just a date. But Tom disagreed. My grandfather said that when the Blackwoods disappeared, there had been increasing activity for weeks before, building to that final night. If you start seeing that pattern, Daniel, you need to leave. The first sign came on September 1st. Daniel woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of singing. Children's voices, dozens of them, coming from the direction of the well. He looked out his window and saw them, translucent figures, child-sized, standing in a circle around the sealed well. All pointing at his house. At him. Over the next 2 weeks, the activity intensified. The figures appeared more frequently. Objects moved violently. The temperature swung wildly. The ground around the well began to sink, as if something beneath was trying to weaken the seal. On September 13th, the night before the anniversary, Daniel, Tom, Marcus, Sarah, and a few others kept vigil at the farm. The entire property was in chaos. Lights flickering. Temperature extremes. The singing was so loud it seemed to come from inside the walls. And from the well itself, despite layers of concrete, came sounds of scratching. Scraping. Something trying desperately to break through. It wants out, Marcus whispered. Whatever is down there, the 100-year mark is significant. It's trying to break the seal. They prepared for whatever was coming, setting up cameras, reinforcing protective measures, and standing together. If they could just get past September 14th, maybe the cycle would pass. But what none of them expected was what would happen at exactly 9:17 p.m., the time when, 100 years earlier, the Blackwood family had vanished forever. At 9:17 p.m. on September 14th, 2023, the power went out. Not just in the house, across the entire property. Even battery-powered lights failed. The only illumination came from emergency flashlights and pale moonlight. And then they heard it. A voice from beneath the earth. Deep, resonant, ancient. Speaking words they didn't recognize but somehow understood. The debt is due. The cycle completes. Send us the keeper of this land. The front door exploded inward, disintegrating like it had aged a century in a second. Fog poured into the house, and with it came the figures. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Ghost children and adult forms, all moving with disturbing inhuman movements, crowding into the kitchen, surrounding the group. And at the center stood a figure that made Daniel's blood run cold. Joseph Blackwood. Or what had once been Joseph Blackwood. The figure wore old farming clothes, but the face was wrong. Too pale, too angular, the eyes too large. When it spoke, its mouth barely moved. Daniel Cooper, you have lived on this land for 5 years. You have honored the seal. You have shown respect. But the 100-year cycle demands payment. Either you join us willingly, or we take you by force. No, Daniel said, his voice stronger than he felt. I don't accept that. I didn't make any deal with you. I don't owe you anything. But you do. By living here. By drawing from this land. This place is ours. Those who dwell here belong to us. Marcus stepped forward. You're not human. You're not ghosts. What are you? The thing smiled. A terrible, wrong smile. We are what was here before. We are what dwells in thin places, where your world touches older worlds. This land is a doorway, and we are what stands in the doorway. The circle of figures drew closer, the temperature dropping until everyone's breath misted. Daniel felt despair creeping in. After everything, all the research, all the precautions, all the careful boundaries, it didn't matter. The 100-year cycle demanded payment, and he was that payment. And then something impossible happened. Duchess entered the house, somehow pushing through the crowd of figures, and positioned herself between Daniel and the Joseph thing. Her ears pinned back, her posture aggressive. And she spoke. Not horse sounds. Words. In the same ancient language the entities were using, but somehow Daniel understood. You lie. I know you. I remember you. I have lived many lives across many years, and in each life, I remember the truth. You are not gatekeepers. You are prisoners, trapped in spaces between, forbidden from entering either world fully. You lie to trick humans into joining you willingly, because you cannot take them by force. You have no power except what is freely given. The assembled figures recoiled from Duchess, the Joseph thing's face contorting in rage or fear. Duchess continued. This human has given you nothing. He sealed your doorway. He respected boundaries. He refused your calls. And I, who have protected this land through many incarnations, I stand with him. You cannot have him. You cannot take him. Your 100-year cycle means nothing except that you're desperate. Go back. Return to your prison. You have no power here. The standoff held for an eternal moment. Then Tom stepped forward, standing beside Duchess and Daniel. I stand with them. Marcus and Sarah joined them. We stand with them. You cannot. The Joseph thing screamed. The cycle must complete. But Duchess's words had changed something. The figures were flickering, becoming less solid. The fog was pulling back. The debt was never real, Duchess said. It was a lie you told. Humans who understand this truth cannot be claimed. And these humans understand. They see you for what you are. Prisoners pretending to be powers. Liars pretending to be law. With a final rage-filled scream, the figures vanished. The fog pulled back. The temperature returned to normal. The lights flickered on. Daniel stood there, staring at Duchess, understanding dawning. You're not just a horse. You never were. Duchess looked at him with those deep, intelligent eyes. I am many things. I am a horse. I am a spirit. I am a guardian. I am whatever this land needs me to be. Tom's family didn't give me to you by chance. I chose to come here because the 100-year mark approached. I knew you would need protection. And I knew you were worthy of it. Tom was staring in wonder. My grandfather knew. That's why this particular horse had to come to Blackwood Farm. It was continuing a tradition. Every 100 years, the guardian returns. For another 100 years, they are bound, Duchess confirmed. They can whisper and haunt, but they cannot claim anyone. Not without consent freely given. And you, Daniel Cooper, never gave consent. The cycle is broken, At least for your lifetime. Daniel sank into a chair, exhausted. I don't understand any of this. You don't need to understand, Duchess said. Her voice, now sounding like normal horse sounds to everyone except Daniel. You just need to know you're protected. This land needed defending. You needed protecting. And I was sent to do both. And in that moment, Daniel understood. He'd been so focused on the horror beneath his land that he'd missed the protection standing right beside him. Duchess hadn't been a lucky acquisition. She'd been a guardian, drawn to the property because it needed defending. The land wasn't just cursed. It was also protected. A thin place where dark things tried to break through, and light things held the line. 5 years later, Daniel still lives on Blackwood Farm. The property is now a working ranch, known locally as one of the most well-maintained in the county. Duchess is still there, now 17 but showing no signs of slowing. The well remains sealed, with permanent markers and clear records of why it should never be opened. The haunting continues at a low level. Strange sounds, cold spots, reminders that this is a thin place requiring respect. But nothing threatening. Nothing dangerous. Daniel has learned to coexist with the strangeness, to maintain boundaries, to listen to his guardian horse when she tells him something's wrong. And every September 14th, on the anniversary, Daniel and Duchess stand together by the fence, grateful for another year of peace, respectful of what lies beneath, and ready to protect the land if needed. Because some places need protecting. Some secrets need guarding. And some guardians look like ordinary horses, until the moment extraordinary protection is needed. That's the true story of Blackwood Farm. The rancher who paid $300 for cursed land, the horse who uncovered a 100-year secret, and the discovery that sometimes the most terrifying things hiding beneath your feet are balanced by the most extraordinary protections standing right beside you. Some doors can't be closed once opened. But sometimes, just sometimes, there's a guardian standing watch to make sure nothing comes through them. And that makes all the difference.